My name is Charles. I am a 71-year-old man living in Boston. For most of my life, I earned my living as a commercial airline pilot, flying passengers through all kinds of storms and turbulent skies. About a month ago, my heart stopped beating. In those moments of clinical death, Jesus Christ pulled me out of my physical body and showed me a terrifying reality that is about to unfold in the skies over America. Right now, you might be hearing news reports about beautiful auroras and strange lights coming to our atmosphere. I am begging you, do not believe the lies. That light is not a natural wonder or some harmless fireworks from nature. It is a deadly trap. Jesus told me that those lights are a sign that the very gates of hell are being torn open right above our heads. He warned me to remember 3 specific signs. You must listen closely because the 3rd sign will happen right inside your own living room. If you do not know how to handle it, the darkness will swallow your family in an instant. He also gave me a list of simple things we must do to survive. This was my personal experience, and I ask you to pray and discern for yourself. But I could not keep this secret any longer. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my garage hunched over an old generator that had been giving me trouble. Everything seemed normal until a sudden, crushing pain slammed into my chest. It felt like a heavy truck had just driven over my ribs. Cold sweat began to pour down my face as I collapsed onto the freezing cement floor. I could hear my wife screaming my name, her voice filled with a terror I had never heard before. Then came the distant, fading wail of sirens. Everything began to flicker like a failing engine until the screen of my life just went black. Total darkness. Suddenly, the weight of the pain was gone. I felt lighter than I ever had in my life, floating up through the ceiling of the hospital and soaring higher and higher. I found myself among the clouds, the very place that had been my office for 30 years. But the sky looked different this time. It was vibrant and alive. That is when he appeared. I saw Jesus. He did not look like the gentle, frail man I had seen in old paintings. He stood there with the authority of a commander-in-chief. The light radiating from him was so warm and so pure that it broke me. I am a tough man, a pilot who has faced death in the air many times, but in his presence I broke down and cried like a little child. He looked at me with eyes that held no judgment or anger, only an incredible depth of love. He spoke to me, and his voice seemed to echo through my very soul. He said, "Charles, you have spent 30 years flying airplanes using only your physical eyes. Now, I'm going to show you what your world is truly about to face right now." As I stood there beside Jesus, the atmosphere around us began to shift. It was like being in the cockpit again, but instead of looking through a glass windshield, I was looking through the very fabric of time and spirit. He reached out his hand and the clouds beneath us parted away. I wasn't just looking at the earth, I was seeing the spiritual weight of it. I saw the United States stretched out like a glowing map, but there were dark patches like oil stains spreading across the states I knew so well. He pointed toward the horizon, far above the curve of the earth where the atmosphere meets the blackness of space. "Look at the shield, Charles," he told me. In all my years of flying, I knew about the magnetic field that protects us from solar radiation. We pilots think of it as a scientific fact, just a layer of gases and energy. But Jesus showed me that it is a spiritual curtain, a hedge of protection placed there by his own hand. And then I saw the first vision. I saw the sky over America begin to ripple. It looked like a piece of silk being pulled too tight until the threads started to pop and snap. Through these tiny rips in the sky, a light began to bleed through, but it wasn't the light of the sun or the soft glow of the moon. It was a harsh, stinging color that I can only describe as a mixture of bruised purple and a neon electric blue that felt wrong to look at. As a pilot, I've seen the northern lights from the flight deck over the North Atlantic. They are emerald green, dancing like curtains in a gentle breeze. They bring a sense of awe. But this light I was seeing in the vision was jagged. It looked like a neon sign flickering in a window of a dive bar. It didn't dance, it pulsed like a heartbeat, a heavy rhythmic thumping that I could feel in my chest, even there in the presence of Jesus. Jesus showed me people all across the country. I saw them in the suburbs of Boston, in the high-rises of New York, and on the beaches of Florida. They were all stepping out of their cars, they were stopping their lawnmowers, they were leaning out of their office windows holding up their cell phones. I saw the excitement on their faces. "Look at the sky," they were shouting to one another. "Isn't it beautiful? It must be a solar storm." I wanted to scream down at them to tell them to get inside, but I was just a witness. Jesus turned to me and his face was grave. He said, "They think they are looking at a miracle, but they are looking at the door being unlocked. When the sky turns these colors, the protection is gone. The enemy has waited for this moment since the beginning." Then he showed me a second vision within that light. As the purple and blue glow intensified, I saw that it wasn't just light, it was a doorway. High above the Rocky Mountains, the sky didn't just change color, it folded back on itself. I saw things moving within that light. They weren't angels and they weren't stars. They looked like shadows that had been given a shape, twisting and turning in the upper atmosphere. They were waiting for the opening to get wide enough. They were like wolves pacing behind a fence, watching the wood rot away until they could burst through. "Tell them about the silence, Charles," Jesus said. Suddenly, the vision shifted. I was no longer looking from the heavens down. I was standing in a forest. I recognized the trees. They were the oaks and hickories of my home state. It was late afternoon, the time when the woods should be loud with the sounds of life. But as the sky above the trees began to turn that sickly neon purple, a heavy, suffocating quiet fell over the land. I watched a hawk perched on a high branch. Normally, that bird is a king watching for its prey. But I saw it tuck its head under its wing and begin to shiver. It didn't fly away, it was too terrified to move. I saw a deer break from the brush, but it didn't run with its usual grace. It was stumbling, its eyes wide and rolling in its head, looking for a cave or a thicket to bury itself in. The crickets, which usually provide the background music of a Boston evening, stopped mid-chirp. It was a silence so deep, it made my ears ring. Jesus explained to me that the animals have a sense that we humans have traded away for our technology. They can feel the frequency of the evil that is pouring through the rips in the sky. They know that the false light is a predator. If you are sitting on your porch and you suddenly realize you can't hear a single bird or a single insect, and even the wind seems to have died in the trees, you must know that the first sign has passed and the second is beginning. As the silence grew, the air changed. I saw a vision of a family sitting down for dinner. They were a normal family, just like yours or mine. The father was laughing, the kids were playing with their food. But then the father stopped. He sniffed the air. He looked toward the window. I could see what he was smelling. It was a metallic, sharp scent. It smelled like a copper penny held in a sweaty hand. It smelled like the air right before a massive electrical fire breaks out in a cockpit. Jesus showed me that this smell is the scent of the veil being burnt away. It is the smell of the world's spiritual armor being compromised. When you smell that copper in the air, you have very little time left. I saw the father in the vision walk to the window and look up. He saw the purple sky, and instead of being afraid, he called his wife over. "Honey, look at this. The news said this might happen. It's some kind of atmospheric event." He didn't know he was looking at the very thing that would lead to the end of his world. Jesus then took me higher again, showing me the Great Lakes. I saw the water reflecting that terrible blue light. The fish were jumping out of the water, trying to escape the vibration that was humming through the very depths. I saw ships on the water, their navigation systems spinning in circles. The pilots, men who were my brothers in the sky, were looking at their screens in confusion. Their instruments were giving them readings that didn't make sense. Their compasses were pointing everywhere and nowhere. When the machines fail, Jesus said, men will try to rely on their own wisdom, but their wisdom is like a candle in a hurricane. I saw a vision of the power grid. It looked like a glowing web of gold threads draped across the country. But as the neon light from the sky grew brighter, the gold threads began to turn black. It started at the edges, the small towns and rural roads. I saw transformers exploding, but they didn't just spark and die. They released a smoke that seemed to linger, a thick, greasy smoke that didn't drift with the wind. I saw a massive city, maybe it was Atlanta or Chicago, and the lights were flickering. It wasn't a quick blink, it was a rhythmic pulse. The streetlights would dim until they were almost gone, then flare up with a blinding white-hot intensity before shattering. I saw people in the streets looking up at the broken lights, then back at the purple sky, their faces pale and drawn. The excitement I had seen earlier was being replaced by a nagging, gnawing sense of dread. The miracle was starting to feel like a threat. Jesus told me, "Charles, you know what it's like to lose an engine at 30,000 feet. You don't panic. You follow the procedure. I am giving my people the procedure, but they must be willing to follow it." He showed me a vision of the atmosphere once more. The rips were getting larger. I could see the darkness behind the false light now. It was like a black ink waiting to be poured into a glass of water. The purple and blue were just the invitation, the beautiful wrapping on a package of death. I saw that the light was actually pulling the oxygen out of the air in certain places. People were beginning to gasp, clutching at their throats, not realizing that the very air was being changed by the pressure of what was coming through. I saw the highways. Thousands of cars were stopped. People had abandoned their vehicles to stand on the pavement and stare at the sky. Some were cheering. Some were praying to a God they didn't know, thanking the universe for this beautiful display. I saw a very few, who were looking at the sky and then running back to their cars. They were the ones who had a lamp in their souls. They recognized the deception. They were trying to get home to their families, but the roads were blocked by the curious and the foolish. Jesus looked at me, and his eyes were like flames. "The time of curiosity is over, Charles. The time of preparation is now. Tell them what happens when the third sign enters their home." As I stood there with Jesus, the vision shifted again. We were no longer high above the earth or in the quiet woods of Massachusetts. I felt like I was being pulled through a wall, and suddenly I was standing in the middle of a typical American living room. It was evening. A young couple was sitting on the couch, their faces lit by the glow of a large television screen. They were watching the news, mesmerized by the breaking reports of the great aurora. They were smiling, talking about how lucky they were to see such a thing in their lifetime. Then, the third sign began. I saw the lamp in the corner of the room give a tiny, sharp pop. It didn't just burn out, it began to pulse. It was a rhythmic dimming and brightening, synchronized with that heavy thumping I had felt in the sky. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It felt like the house itself was starting to breathe. The couple stopped talking. The husband stood up and walked over to the lamp, shaking his head. He thought it was just a loose bulb. But as he reached for it, I saw a spark of that same neon blue light jump from the socket to his fingertip. He yelped and pulled back, but the pulsing didn't stop. Then the television screen began to warp. The news anchor's face stretched and twisted until it was no longer human. The sound didn't just turn to static. It turned into a low, guttural humming that seemed to vibrate the floorboards. Jesus whispered to me, "This is the haunting of the wires. When the shield is gone, the enemy does not just walk the earth. He moves through the things men have built to distract themselves." I saw the microwave in the kitchen start to beep on its own. The digital clock on the stove began to spin backward at a frantic speed. Every electronic device in that home was reacting to the pressure from outside. The couple was paralyzed with a confusion that was rapidly turning into terror. They didn't know that this was the final countdown. Jesus then took me to a massive retail store, a place like a Walmart or a Target. It was crowded with hundreds of people who had rushed out to buy supplies or just to be around others because they were afraid of the strange sky. The lights in the ceiling began that same terrible pulsing. Suddenly, every cash register in the building began to spit out long ribbons of paper, covered in strange, jagged symbols that no one could read. The computer screens at the checkout lanes went red, a deep blood red that cast a sickening shadow over the faces of the shoppers. I saw a mother trying to pay for a gallon of milk, but her credit card wouldn't work. The machine didn't just say declined, it melted the plastic of the card right there in the slot. The automatic sliding doors at the front of the store suddenly slammed shut and locked with a sound like a prison gate. People began to scream. They were pushing and shoving, trying to get out, but the handles wouldn't budge. The air in the store was getting thick and smelling of that old copper. The panic was rising like a flood. When the world goes silent and the machines turn against them, Jesus said, men will find out who they truly serve. In a flash, the scene changed. I was back in the air, but I was looking at a commercial jetliner, much like the ones I had flown for 3 decades. My heart sank as I saw the cockpit. The pilots were fighting the controls, but the instrument panel was a mess of flickering purple lights. The glass displays were cracking from the heat of the spiritual pressure. I saw the fear in the eyes of my fellow pilots. They were trying to fly by their training, but their training was for a world that followed the laws of physics. Those laws were being suspended. The plane wasn't falling. It was being pulled toward the ground by an invisible weight. I watched as it disappeared into a bank of thick black clouds that looked like smoke. Then Jesus brought me back to that typical American street. The pulsing lights in the houses suddenly stopped. For a heartbeat, there was a glimmer of hope that it was over. But then, every light in the entire neighborhood went out at once. It wasn't just a power outage. It was as if the concept of light had been erased from the world. This was the start of the 3 days of darkness. Jesus placed a sphere of his own light around me, so I could see what was happening. Without his protection, I would have been consumed. This darkness was not just the absence of light, it was a physical substance. I saw it rolling down the street like a wave of heavy black oil. It moved with a purpose. It didn't just fill the space, it searched for openings. I saw it sliding under the gaps in front doors. I saw it pressing against the glass of windows, looking for a crack. And it was cold. A cold that didn't just chill the skin, but seemed to freeze the very soul. I saw a man who had been caught outside, trying to run from his car to his front porch. He was only 10 feet away, but as the darkness touched him, he stopped mid-stride. He couldn't see his own hand in front of his face. He began to turn in circles, his breath coming in ragged gasps that turned to ice in the air. He was lost in his own front yard. I saw things moving in that darkness. They didn't have solid bodies. They were like shadows made of smoke and hatred. They moved around the man, whispering to him in voices that sounded like people he knew. "Over here, Henry. I'm right here," one voice cried. The man turned toward it, but there was nothing there. "Help me, I'm hurt," another voice sobbed. It sounded just like his daughter. The man began to sob, reaching out into the blackness, and as he stepped off his porch into the deep dark, he was gone. He didn't fall, he was just absorbed into the blackness. Jesus looked at me and reminded me of my pilot training. "Charles, remember the flying blind rule. When you cannot see the horizon, your body will tell you lies. You will feel like you are level when you are upside down. You will feel like you are safe when you are crashing." I understood then. During those 3 days, the enemy will use our own senses against us. He will use our ears to hear the cries of our loved ones. He will use our eyes to see shapes that aren't there. He will use our feelings of panic to make us run when we should stay still. We then visited the first type of home Jesus wanted to show me. It was a beautiful house, expensive and modern, but it was pitch black. The people inside had been so caught up in the false light of the sky that they hadn't even bothered to close their curtains. They had been standing at the windows when the darkness hit. I saw the father standing in the middle of his living room, holding a high-powered flashlight. He was clicking the button over and over, but the beam wouldn't go further than an inch from the lens. The darkness was swallowing the light of the battery as fast as it could be produced. The front door of this house had been left unlocked. I watched as the black, oily mist drifted over the threshold. The family inside was screaming, but their voices sounded muffled, as if they were being buried under a mountain of dirt. They had no spiritual armor, no prayer in their hearts, and no preparation in their home. They were completely at the mercy of the things that lived in the dark. It was a sight that made me want to look away, but Jesus held my gaze. "This is the result of ignoring the watchman," he said softly. Then we moved to the second type of home. This one was much humbler, maybe a small farmhouse or a trailer, but it was different. I could see a soft golden glow coming from the edges of the windows. When I looked closer, I saw that the windows had been sealed with thick black tape. Not a single sliver of the outside world could be seen from the inside. Inside, a family was huddled together on the floor. They had a single beeswax candle burning in the center of the room. It was a small flame, but in that supernatural darkness, it shone like a sun. The father was reading from a Bible, his voice steady and calm. The mother was holding the children, and they were singing a hymn, not loudly, but with a deep, unwavering peace. I saw the darkness outside pressing against that house. I saw the shadow creatures scratching at the walls, trying to find a way in. They were mimicking the voices of neighbors, even the sound of a crying baby on the doorstep. But the family didn't move. They didn't look at the door. They didn't even acknowledge the sounds. They stayed focused on the light of that candle and the words of the book. They were in instrument flight mode. They were trusting their spiritual gauges instead of their physical ears. These are the ones who listened, Jesus told me. They are not safe because they are strong. They are safe because they are obedient. Finally, we came to the third house. This was the one that broke my heart. It was a nice home with a "God bless our home" sign on the wall. The people inside were churchgoers. I saw them in the vision. They were people I might have sat next to in a pew on Sunday morning. But as the darkness fell, they were in a state of total indecision. They had a candle, but it was a cheap scented one that was already sputtering and giving off a foul, black smoke. They hadn't taped their windows because they were worried about what the neighbors would think if they looked crazy. They were standing in their kitchen, arguing. The wife wanted to pray, but the husband was busy trying to get his cell phone to work, cursing under his breath because he couldn't check the news. He was leaning toward the window, trying to peel back the curtain just a tiny bit to see if the streetlights were back on. "Don't do it," I yelled, though I knew he couldn't hear me. Just then, a heavy thud hit the front door. It wasn't a violent bang, but a desperate, frantic knocking. A voice came through the wood, clear as a bell. It was the voice of their college-age son who was supposed to be away at school. "Mom, Dad, I drove home as fast as I could. I'm freezing. Please, my hands are numb. I can't find my key. Let me in." The mother gasped, her hand going to her heart. "That's Billy. He's out there in that." She started toward the door, her face filled with a mother's love. The father dropped his phone and followed her. They were so sure, they were so certain it was their boy. They reached for the deadbolt. Jesus showed me what was actually on the other side of that door. It wasn't a young man in a college hoodie. It was a towering, wretched thing with eyes like hollow pits and a mouth that didn't move, even as the voice of their son continued to pour out of it. It was a trap designed specifically for their hearts. As their fingers touched the lock, Jesus pulled me away. I didn't see the door open, but I knew the outcome. Jesus turned to me and said, "Charles, the heart is deceitful above all things. If they have not surrendered their feelings to me, the enemy will use their own love to destroy them. This is why you must warn them. Do not open the door. Do not look out, no matter what you hear." He then showed me a vision of a hospital during these 3 days. It was a place of absolute nightmare. The machines that kept people alive had failed. The backup generators wouldn't start because the false light had changed the way fuel burns. I saw nurses and doctors trying to work in the dark, but they were being touched by the coldness. Some were falling to their knees in prayer, and in those moments, a small light would appear around them, keeping the darkness at bay. Others were running in terror, only to disappear into the black hallways where the things from the sky were waiting. In that time, Jesus said, there will be no middle ground. You will either be in my light, or you will be in the darkness. There is no gray area left. I saw a vision of a great cathedral. It was filled with people who had run there for safety, but many of them were just there out of habit. They were crying out for mercy, but they were also blaming God for what was happening. I saw the darkness beginning to seep into the cracks of the cathedral's stone walls, because the hearts of the people inside were filled with bitterness and pride. Even a holy building cannot protect a heart that refuses to forgive. Then Jesus showed me something that gave me hope. I saw a prison. In one of the cells, there was a man who had done terrible things. He was alone in the dark. But as the cold touched him, he didn't scream. He fell on his face and cried out, "Jesus, save me! I am a sinner, but please don't leave me in this dark." In an instant, that cell was filled with a light so bright it made the darkness outside look like a joke. An angel stood there with him, and for those 3 days, that prisoner was in a paradise that the richest man on earth couldn't buy. "It is never too late," Jesus whispered, "until the door is closed, but the door is closing soon." Jesus' hand remained on my shoulder, and I felt a surge of strength that allowed me to look deeper into the darkness without losing my mind. He wanted me to understand the how of survival, not just the what. He showed me that the physical preparations many people think are most important, the gold coins, the secret bunkers, the heavy weapons, were like trying to stop a hurricane with a screen door. "Listen to me closely, Charles," Jesus said. "I am not telling you to go out and spend thousands of dollars on expensive underground bunkers. But there are a few practical things you should do right now while the stores are still open and the shelves are full." He showed me a vision of a small apartment. She didn't have much money, but she was following the instructions he had whispered to her spirit. I watched as she bought several rolls of thick black tape and some heavy blackout curtains. Jesus explained to me that you must be able to seal your windows so that the light from the darkness outside cannot leak into your home. I want to be clear, I am talking about blocking the view so you do not look at what is out there, not sealing every tiny air hole. If you seal the house airtight, you will run out of oxygen before the 3 days are over, and that is not what Jesus wants. The danger isn't the air itself, it's the sight of the things moving in the dark. Your eyes are the windows to your soul, and if you let those false lights or those creatures into your vision, you give them a path into your heart. Next, he showed me the importance of the light you keep inside. You need to buy candles made of pure beeswax, he told me. I saw a vision of a factory where they make those cheap, colorful candles filled with artificial perfumes. When those were lit in the darkness, they flickered and died almost instantly. The blackness outside seemed to choke them. But when a beeswax candle was lit, the flame was steady and bright. It had a different quality, a purity that the darkness couldn't stand. Avoid those cheap scented candles made with chemicals, because burning those in a closed room for a long time will make the air toxic and cause you to choke. The air will already be heavy and strange. You don't want to add poison to it. I saw visions of people stocking up on water. You also need to store enough drinking water to last every person in your home for at least 3 days. I saw a man filling old milk jugs and placing them under his bed. I saw a grandmother tucking bottles of water behind her sofa. When the water systems in the cities fail or become contaminated by the strange pressure from the sky, you will need this. Finally, stock up on simple foods that do not require any cooking or electricity, like canned goods and crackers. When the power goes out, you will not be able to use the stove or the microwave. So keep it simple. Don't worry about a feast, worry about sustenance. But then Jesus' voice grew even more serious. "But my friends, you can tape your windows with steel and concrete, but if there is a hole in your heart, the darkness will still find a way inside. That hole has a name, and it is called unforgiveness." Suddenly, I wasn't looking at other people anymore. I was looking at myself. Jesus showed me a vision of my own heart as if it were a complex engine. I saw a dark, jagged crack running right through the center of it. It looked like a piece of metal that had suffered from fatigue, the kind that causes a plane's wing to snap off without warning. "What is that?" I asked, though I think I already knew. "That is the wall you built between yourself and your son," Jesus replied. I saw a vision of my son, Billy, in Seattle. I saw him walking down a rainy street, looking lonely and tired. For 5 years, I hadn't spoken to him. I had been so angry because he had walked away from everything I taught him. I thought I was being righteous by being angry, but Jesus showed me that my anger was actually a doorway. During the vision of the 3 days of darkness, I saw myself in my own home in Boston. I saw the darkness pressing against my house. And then I heard it, the voice of Billy at my door, crying out for help. In the vision, I saw myself moving toward the door, driven by a father's instinct. But because I had a grudge in my heart, I couldn't tell the difference between my son's real spirit and the demon mimicking him. The unforgiveness acted like static on a radio, blocking the instrument of my discernment. If I didn't forgive him now while the sun was still shining, I would be deceived when the lights went out. I saw that if I did not forgive him, the darkness would use his very voice to lead me to my death. "I am asking you to do something right now," Jesus told me, looking into my soul. "Pick up your phone. Call that person you have been hating or the family member you refuse to speak to. Forgive them. Let the anger go. You must clear the trash out of your heart before the sun goes down and the sky changes color. Do not let a grudge be the reason the door to your soul is left open. I saw visions of thousands of people doing this. I saw a woman calling her sister after a 10-year feud. I saw a man reaching out to a former business partner who had cheated him. As they spoke the words, "I forgive you," I saw the dark cracks in their hearts seal up and glow with a light that matched Jesus's. This was the real sealing of the home. You can tape the windows all you want, but if you hate your brother, the window of your heart is wide open to the enemy. Jesus then showed me the why. I saw a vision of the whole world buzzing with activity. I saw people staring at their phones, scrolling through endless videos, trapped in a world of digital noise. I saw the pride of men who thought they had conquered nature with their science. A lot of people ask me why a loving God would allow such a terrifying thing to happen, Jesus said, as if reading the thoughts of every person who would ever hear my story. They ask, how could he be so cruel? But I am telling you, this is actually his final act of mercy. He showed me a vision of what would happen during those 3 days. I saw a man who had never prayed a day in his life. He was sitting in his dark living room, his phone dead, his internet gone, the silence of the world pressing in on him. For the first time, he had no distractions, no sports, no politics, no news, no entertainment. In that total silence, for the first time in his life, he finally was able to hear the voice of God. I saw him fall to his knees, tears streaming down his face in the dark. He wasn't crying because he was afraid. He was crying because he finally realized how much he was loved and how far he had wandered. During those 3 terrible days, millions of people who were once stubborn and proud will fall to their knees in tears and repent. They will be saved. Jesus showed me that it is better to be terrified for 3 days and live forever than to be comfortable for 70 years and be lost. At the very last second, Jesus would rather scare us into waking up so he can save our souls than let us go happily and blindly into destruction. It is a wake-up call, born out of a love so great we can barely understand it. I saw a vision of the moment the 3 days ended. It wasn't a slow sunrise. It was a sudden, glorious burst of light that didn't come from the sun, but from the very center of the heavens. The darkness didn't just fade. It vanished, chased away by a roar of light that felt like a shout of victory. I saw people stepping out of their homes, their faces glowing. They looked at each other with new eyes. The world looked different, cleaner, as if a great fever had finally broken. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder and whispered that it was time to go back and warn the others. I didn't want to leave. The peace in his presence was so thick you could almost lean against it. But he looked at me with those eyes of fire and love and said, "Go, Charles. Tell them to check their instruments. Tell them the storm is on the radar." In an instant, I felt like I was in a free fall from 30,000 feet without a parachute. It was a jarring, terrifying drop that ended with me gasping for air. As I opened my eyes on a hospital bed, my entire body was throbbing with pain, and I could hear the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and see wires and tubes everywhere. The doctor rushed over looking like he had seen a ghost, and he told me that I had been clinically dead for 12 minutes. 12 minutes of total silence in this world. But in my mind, I had never been more awake or alert in my entire life. I knew exactly what I had to do. The very first thing I did when I was strong enough to hold a phone was not to check my bank account or my emails. I called my son in Seattle. When he finally picked up, his voice sounded groggy and surprised to hear from me after so many years of silence. I started crying right there in the hospital room. I told him, "Son, it is your father. I love you, and I forgive you for everything that happened in the past." I told him that he did not even have to believe in my faith right now. But I begged him, as his father, to go out today and buy several cases of water and some heavy tape for his windows. It was not a sermon or a lecture. It was the desperate plea of a father who had seen the storm coming and wanted his child to be safe. This is Captain Charles Vance speaking to you now. I have landed the final flight of my career, and I am telling you these things because I do not want any of you to be lost. When the darkness comes, I am just an old man from Boston with nothing to gain by telling this story. But if you saw your neighbor's house about to catch fire, wouldn't you shout at the top of your lungs? That is what I am doing right now. Do not wait for the government or the news to tell you what is happening. When you look up and see that sky turning a strange neon purple or electric blue, do not hesitate. Run to your home, lock your doors, and most importantly, make sure your heart is clean and free of any hatred. This message is not meant for your entertainment. It is an SOS signal for your soul. I cannot go to every house and knock on every door, so that responsibility now falls to you. Please share this warning right now with the people you love the most. One simple share could be the very thing that saves their life from the trap of the false light. If you're ready to protect your home and your heart, write a comment below that says, "My family is ready." May the Lord keep you and your family safe through the coming days.